Hey everybody, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz, and I am recording this while visiting my mother in Tampa, Florida. And I am so lucky because I couldn't ask for more of a mother. Having a great trip. And what's really funny though is that in the den, and this is like the house where I mostly grew up, my parents put up an 8x10 photo of me with my trumpet and flugelhorn from the 1990s, which is so humiliating. Like, I even have a mustache in it. It's horrifying. But seeing it again brought back this sudden flood of emotions, reminding me again of that passion, what really drives me. And I'm always thinking of what we're all doing in this business that, even with my music and entertainment business, I still need from time to time this shot of passion, this shot of a memory that reminds me of why I got into this business. The music that I love so much, the entertainment, and creating this experience for people for some of the most important nights and days and events of their lives. And so it was just, as horrified as I was by my picture, it just reminded me of all of that. So it really was a nice trip, or is a nice trip, getting ready to go back soon. Anyway, I want to mention, if you missed last week's episode, Bill Bowen, the videographer who leads with his heart, allowing him to capture the most emotional moments of weddings and events. And the way he does that can really help all of us in the event industry. So whether or not you're a videographer, I really recommend you check it out to find out how he does it. It's really wonderful. He's also created some amazingly touching legacy films, and he gives great tips and ideas. And be sure to check out last week's episode. So this morning's is so exciting. It is part 2 with David Stark, a renowned New York City-based event producer and designer whose team creates events worldwide for weddings, entertainment, fashion, publishing, arts, media, and for consumer product industries. Some of his high-profile clients and events include Brad Pitt, Glenn Close, Saturday Night Live's 40th anniversary, Louis Vuitton, and high-visibility events and fundraising galas for the nation's most elite, including the Whitney Museum and the Metropolitan Opera. David has 5 books published so far, and he's had product collaborations, including a limited edition collection of one-of-a-kind art pieces produced exclusively for Bergdorf Goodman. David's been a guest expert on many television shows and also many, many features in major publications. And he was inducted into the event organization Biz Bash Hall of Fame. Now, I re-released David's part 1 interview on December 10th of 2018, which was really something else. So if you want to go listen to that one, December 10th of 2018, check it out. I want to also urge you to listen to the follow-on segment coming out on Wednesday, The Next Level, in which my co-hosts and I tease out some of the highlights to help use so that you could bring your business to the next level. And so this week's guest on The Next Level is Sean Lowe of the Business of Being Creative. Many of you know him. Sean always brings so much perspective and wisdom to impart. So check out that release in 2 days. So now enjoy my conversation with David Stark. So David, I am so excited to sit down with you again. It has been a while since the first interview, and I notice some of this information might be a little old. Sometimes I'm behind, but basically you were recently, I believe, in Vogue and Harper's Bazaar as one of the top planners of the world. Congratulations. Mazel tov, I'll say.
Thank you. The world,
the planet. You are conquering.
Those are big.
No, but that's great recognition. I mean, you've been doing this a long time, but that's awesome. And so, I was thinking how you're known for pushing boundaries. And I'm curious what boundaries you pushed last year, because at the time of this recording, it's January 2019. So in 2018, what was 1 or 2, like your biggest favorite event where you really got to do your thing?
Oh, that is a question.
Unless you signed an NDA, you can't say a word, or just pretend.
No. You know what? I don't know if I have a single event where I was able to do everything. I mean, I'd like to say that, a good portion, if not most of the events, if not all of the events, welcome us to take things to an innovative level. I mean, that's our goal. The goal is to create something that's visionary, that tells a story for our clients. And so we're very, very lucky to be able to do that all the time. We've certainly done many things over the course of the year that I'm proud of. We worked on an event for an extraordinary jewelry house from Germany called Hemmerle that had a big anniversary, a big 125th anniversary at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the Temple of Dendur. I'm really proud of that experience. We worked with pals of ours from a graphic design agency called Topos that are extraordinary designers, and they created, I think it was an hours-long film that was a fantasy-scape that blanketed all of the walls of the Temple of Dendur that, was about the inspiration of the house and then also jewelry that they've created over the years. And it was really extraordinary to blanket that whole institution in this ever-changing fantasy-scape.
Jeez, this is that like throughout the event, or did people sit and watch and
No.
experience?
This was moving wallpaper throughout the event. But it was so lyrical and it was so beautiful. And to be able to create that amount of content and have it be such a custom experience. I mean, that was a really beautiful experience. It was bold, but it was subtle. It was not, nobody would walk in and say, oh my God, that's over the top. They would just say that was thoughtful. And so one of the things that I have a big goal about is, and we've probably talked about this before, I don't want people to walk into our events and say, look how much money they spent. I just want people to walk in and say, wow, that's cool. Or wow, I understand something more about this person or this organization or this company that I did before, or I'm really inspired by like how moving this is, or the subtlety is what is the power, not the ostentatiousness of stuff. So, I feel blessed that I have plenty of those kinds of occasions to experiment with. And last year was a really good year of that.
Can you give me the details of maybe another story that illustrates what you're talking about? Where people walk in, they get that sense.
Sure. A bride and groom that I worked with a little while back had a Harry Potter obsession. And so you wouldn't normally think that Harry Potter and weddings go hand in hand. How do you make this really elegant, special night or day for somebody, and it's rooted in this fantasy book? But it was a great example of how you can do it. And, it was super chic. It was really fun. It was unexpected. But, like the dining room had thousands of candles hanging over.
Oh, I love that. Just like in the films.
Room, right.
Yeah.
And, there were all kinds of little rooms that you went into where they were almost like being in Harry Potter rooms, but they took the idea of what was explored in the book, but we actually put it into the story of what the couple was all about.
Wait, just to break that down for a minute, at what point in the night are they free to be walking kind of aimlessly through these rooms?
In this particular occasion, the event took place in an old equestrian center. And so to enter into the main space, you had to go through an area of stables, and the stables themselves were turned into these various different fantasy rooms. And so as you're walking in and to the party, you could explore. And as you, took a break to go to the restroom, you could explore as well.
That's fantastic.
Or anytime you felt like it, actually. But there were a lot of things revealed over the course of an evening. And I'm proud of that work because, it's quirky. And so part of the project is how do you keep the quirk that made it attractive in the first place, but how do you make it something that's special for an occasion like that? But how do you use it as a platform to tell a specific story or a personal story? So our goal was not to create the Harry Potter party. Our goal was to create a wedding inspired by Harry Potter that was meaningful to the couple and to convey that meaning to their guests.
So can you give me few specifics that were worked into the Harry Potter theme that was telling their specific story?
God, I'm spacing. What's it called? The Room of...
Geez, my daughter made me watch this like 3 gazillion times, and I can't answer that either.
Okay, we're going to have to come back to this one.
I'm going to get into my daughter's going to kill me. No, but also, I love how you're also talking about that there were things being revealed throughout, right? So you're creating these moments that when people maybe least expect it, something happens, right? Addressing one of the 5 senses. That's what I imagine you're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the cocktail space took place in this enchanted forest. And that enchanted forest was a created experience. And within the book, there are these flying keys. And the flying keys were an element that we used at the escort card table, where there was a key attached to each of the escort cards, but then there were also a series of cards that were flying in the sky and keys with wings and things like that. And so, there's a lovely personal connection where, this key is unlocking the door to a future together. And this key is also something that is, harkens back to the story. And where those things intermix is something that I think is kind of special for an occasion like that. So it's not so much that our goal is to make a film premiere party that is tied specifically to the film or a book launch party attached to the book, but to fuse the personality of the couple with some of the attributes of the story that were appealing to them.
God, I love that. What would you say are some of the biggest lessons that you learned? Because you've been doing this 20-something years, and we talked earlier about just keeping it fresh. And I'm sure, I know we both love to challenge ourselves. So what was one of the biggest challenges and biggest lessons that you got out of last year, if you could kind of put that together?
One of the biggest challenges out of last year.
Or even past couple years, something recent.
Well, I think for me, it's a lot about business growth and how do we have the structure of what we do keep up with ambition. And, we want to do more and bigger. And, sometimes it's sad we have to turn down things that we really want to do because we have conflicts on the calendar that we've already committed to.
I know that feeling.
But, I think we've spent a lot of time over the last year really thinking about structure and empowerment and leadership and trying to find that right balance between work and life and trying to have our organization be a place that people want to spend many years at. And some of that stuff is hard. You have to look in the mirror and you have to look at what you do well and what you don't do well. And you have to think about how to adapt that. So that's not as exciting as what's the greatest decor idea I've come up with for somebody's party. But that, I think, is truly at the crux of, at this point, I feel very excited by the work that we do. I feel very confident that the quality level that is intrinsic to our brand and to how we push our events from a production standpoint, an ideation standpoint, the quality of the installations, I feel very confident that that is a very secure space that we live in. I can't think about coming up with ideas or inventing, new things any way else than what we do because it's the language that we've developed and it's the language that we speak. So that kind of thinking is intrinsic to what we do. But the structure to support that, that's something that, is an evolving beast that needs to be tamed.
When we talked last time, we talked about how creative people, a lot of us are struggling with dealing with that business aspect of our creative business. And I loved a statement you made that really stuck with me. It really stuck. It actually affected me quite a bit. You talked about how building a business structure is in itself a creative act. And that helped. That's reframing it in a sense. Because at the time, I was just getting frustrated and with that aspect of it. I just want to create it. When you said that, and that's what you're talking about right now too, right? If you don't have that foundation, the building blocks put together, how can you do the creative part when you talk about the...
Well, really, putting together a team is perhaps one of the most creative things you could do. And it's real hard work. And there's not a prescriptive, direct line for which to do that in. And it's ever changing. Your needs change all the time. I've long since gotten past, of course, there's disappointment when, an adored team member decides to leave our nest for whatever reason, whether they take another job or they move to another place or they have a career change, whatever is that reason. But I now see that, every departure is also an opportunity. And so somebody else is going to come in that has new ideas, new experiences, new love for what they do, new things that they're really good at. And those are things that we thrive on. Bringing that new energy into the organization, that's pretty great. So yes, we can shed a tear over somebody's departure, but we should also celebrate at the same time somebody's arrival, because what they bring to what we do can be pretty extraordinary.
I had a situation, this really sparks it. It wasn't in the too distant past where a great talent wanted to move, go somewhere else. And I do know by now that, again, every door that's closing, there's another one opening, an opportunity. Though I sometimes have a twinge of emotional,
Yeah, me too. I mean, I won't say that I don't have that sadness for, a minute or so.
And maybe concern. But what happened with me was that very quickly, unexpectedly, I found someone who, and it's what you're talking about, knocked me out, and their energy. Because, when someone wants to leave, not a bad thing, but the energy starts to change with them and what's going on within, as you say, the nest. So this new person came on, and, again, it's difficult for people. There's a certain family element, to this. And what they brought, the freshness, the excitement, the energy, oh my God, this one particular band of mine, exploding in a whole nother way again.
Contagious.
Yeah.
When somebody brings that kind of excitement to something, it's contagious. The world is filled with awesome people. There's so many talents out there. So, yes, let's mourn for the departure of somebody who's beloved, but let's also optimistically celebrate the unknown of who's coming in. That's bringing a lot of excitement.
And to trust that that's going to come. I believe there is some universal something, right? If we put out that positive energy, it's not magic. I really believe keep that open mind, and then we see it also.
Well, I think so. I mean, we're very much about being a team sport here. And, one of the comments that I've gotten from people who have joined our company and have come from other places, when I said, is it what you expect it to be? They would say, well, it's what I was hoping for, but it's just so much more collaborative than what I had anticipated. And I do really ascribe to this as a team sport. And at the scale of what we do and at the quantity of the projects that we do, you need all kinds of eyes and thoughts and expertises on something. And, not one person can know it all, and not one person can do it all. And the work that we've done over the past year and continue to do have been about how do we empower the teams to step up to bat and be really successful. And that means different things at different times in different ways. But for me, that's the biggest challenge and the thing that we're really focused on.
If you can give me an example of how you do that. Is it when you're interviewing? Is it when you bring them in? You have a certain talk? I know you've got mission statement. How do you facilitate that environment?
Well, the whole mission statement thing is new for us and something that I really believe in and something that I'm really latching onto. And, we've talked about this before, but, the bottom line is that historically, I figured anybody that we hired that came to work for us, of course, they knew what the goal was. The goal was to make great parties and do a really good job. That's not enough. And it's not enough for me and us, and it's not enough for them. Like, they have to know that when they get up in the morning and they go to work, it's because of the following things. Like, these are the things that we strive for. This is what's important to us. And so we've developed these words that are at the core of what our goals are, and they inform what we do and how we do it. And if something goes off the rails, we pull it back towards the mission statement. But I think it starts there. If everybody's unified in a goal, rather than just to make money or just to get another account or to get the job, those are things that are just like part of the mechanics of working. And so to have something that's a higher power to work towards beyond the mechanics of working, I think that's a critical place to start.
To focus them. So, yeah, and not to, I find I'm learning more and more not to make any assumptions about what anyone thinks. Like when I bring them to my organization, like you said, of course, whether, in my case, music, got to perform to a certain standard, you got to show up on time, blah, 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 blah. But no, to actually spell it out and then have them buy into it too. And
I think that the best companies, this is what they do. They have these missions that they stand for. Sometimes you see it in retailers. I went to school with Jonathan Adler, and I've always been charmed. He has this mission statement that I think it's on the website, but it's filled with things like, we believe that all colors match. And I've always thought, like, that's just adorable.
Uh-huh.
That's like a quirky way of doing things.
That's a great way of saying it.
But, I think that if everybody can lobby around a higher power of what their goals are, then achieving them and having that be part of what you do every day, I think is, and I don't mean it in sort of a religious, crazy way. I just mean, again, I think the clearest way is to separate the mechanics of doing a job from goal making, goal setting.
I can see, I'm getting inspired right now that not even just handing them the mission statement, but I imagine also discussing it together, talking through it.
Absolutely.
Because there's interpretation.
Absolutely. And, we try to put that into our feedback. when we're giving feedback on a project or on a design or how an installation went, what we're trying to do to reset our thought processes here is how do all of those things rate in light of what our mission is? So, for us, those words are partner, storytelling, visionary, and innovation. And so, we talk a lot about whether we were good partners. Were we good partners to each other? Were we good partners to our client? Were we good partners to the vendors that were involved? From a storytelling perspective, how did we do? All of these things are part of the DNA now of how we're thinking about what we do. It's to give us focus so that we're not just all aimlessly doing our work without a greater goal. And I think that as a company grows, this is one of the things that's become really important. If we all have the same goals, there could be other goals too. There could be subheadings, there could be, shades of gray, but we all have a unified mission that is clearly stated for everybody. Then it's clear.
And do you have a feedback session, let's call it, after every event?
We do.
Boy, I love that. You're making me think, why not? Even with bands, why wouldn't we sit and talk afterward about it? I love that idea.
We've recently been doing a lot of work with conflict and resolution. There's no journey that doesn't have a conflict in it, right? And so a good relationship is not that you never have something that you're in disagreement about or something that hasn't been a disappointment, but it's how you deal with it when there is one, right?
How about, and certainly this is related, in terms of managing a team? I mean, we're talking about, in a sense, keeping them motivated, making sure they understand what the mission statement is. And I understand that it's fluid. I like that too. It's not just one time, right? It changes, it evolves, and all of that. Do you have any particular ways of managing the team? I mean, you're the, chief creative officer. I know Chris, who's wonderful under you, and you've got a lot of people. I said about 50 people. How are you doing this and being creative and running a business? Because again, we're talking about people and keeping them on the same page.
Well, beneath me, I have a team of leaders who have a group of people that report to them, that they manage. And, that varies. There's somebody who manages all of our creative producers. There's somebody who is the director of client services. There's somebody who's the director of our studio. Each of them has a specialty in which they direct. And when things are working really, really, really beautifully, everybody's working hand in hand to get all of the different departments together towards the same goal. I'm very reliant upon them. I'm very appreciative of them. We've got, an administrative department too that is super important to what we do. Sometimes, they're not called out with accolades because they're not the ones that are making the events or doing the install, but we couldn't do what we do without them. Everybody has a really important role in the engine of what we do here. And, I have to be reliant upon those people to own and lead their charge. And together we work together. I mean, I'm in the trenches with them. It's not like I'm sitting by a pool having a glass of wine while they're all doing the work.
You mean you're checking in with them often, periodically, and discussing?
I'm in the foxhole doing the work with them.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the, sometimes at an event and people will say something like, I can't believe you're sweeping that, or you're doing, why wouldn't I? So you have to lead by example, right? So I am never above doing anything that it takes to do the job, whether that's sweeping out the truck or lifting that heavy thing or boxing the tablecloth myself. But being in the trenches with the team, I think, shows them that we're all the same.
Absolutely.
And that we all have an investment in this together. Mm-hmm. And for me, leading by example is really important.
I have something really special to talk about. It's our sponsor for today, and believe me, we check them out thoroughly. We don't just take anyone. So I want to say that if you need more presence in the market and you're wondering how to accomplish that, you need to check out OFD Consulting. They are an award-winning publicity agency that focuses on the wedding industry. Their client portfolio ranges from top-tier planners and venues to well-regarded national brand and industry thought leaders. OFD Consulting has placed clients in a slew of popular online and offline publications, and they also have a service dedicated entirely to B2B press. So for those looking to elevate your brand reputation among peers through online mentions, guest articles, podcasts, and speaking engagements, you've got to contact them. And one more piece of information I want to tell you, that if you are a small business, and most of us are, and you want to dip your toes in the PR waters, check out the OFD Collective, which is a 3-tier membership with robust educational and coaching opportunities along with ongoing press leads. So check out ofdconsulting.com. Well, and then also, if you're going to, as your leadership role, if you're going to make some kind of a change with the management objectives, goals, they know that you get it. You've been there. They see you there. They know you understand. So we're talking about internally. There's another aspect of that, which is the partner team. I don't like when people call them vendors. I'm going to say partner team.
Sure.
How do you choose your partner team? Do you tend to use the same people? Do you create a different team for every event? How do you approach that?
Oh, we use different people. I mean, there was like a time where the industry was smaller and maybe you had a best friend of a caterer that you worked with every single project on. But, the truth is that the clients have become more sophisticated. I like to say they're out 9 nights a week, and so they've been everywhere and they've done everything. And on Tuesday, they didn't like the food that they had. And on Wednesday, they didn't like the service that they had. And on Friday, it was great. And not every group is right for every job, and part of the thing about making an experience unique is bringing together a unique group of people for each project. That's not to say that we don't have a cadre of companies or people that we've worked with for years that we continue to do so with. But I think we're quite expansive in terms of, working with lots of different groups and thinking about what's the right job for them and who's the right client for them. That's not based necessarily on price, although sometimes that's a factor, but that's generally based upon what the job is and what the goals are.
I do in music entertainment an enormous amount of custom work, custom crafting. It's not just the set acts, bands that I have, but also, but even the kind of event, and I'll think to myself, there's a certain people I want to put together. It's almost like you talk about with painting. You work with red, what it is, and orange, but then you combine it, you throw in a little yellow at one point. So I also think about the creative team that I'm putting together. It's like a chemical reaction, right? And that's one of my most favorite moments, David, is knowing the creative capabilities of each of these people. And I can't even explain in my mind how, or I just know if I take this person, a whole new thing.
Well, that's right. The customization of it all. What people want these days, sometimes you want to hire a wedding band. But sometimes you want what I'll refer to as an immersive theatrical experience that reinforces or sort of enunciates the goal of what an event is. And sometimes that doesn't exist off the shelf from any particular company. And so that's a little bit more like theater. You're inventing something. And, I think the trend is going towards that these days in certain circles. But, that's hard work. And that's a journey, but it also most often leads to something that's really satisfying at the end.
Yeah, isn't it? It's almost this sense, right? If you have this particular caterer with this and this lighting designer and linen, and I love that. Now, what about how do you work with them? Because, again, you're the producer, the chief designer of the event. You're bringing in all these highly creative people, God knows how many, from a few to, 100, whatever. How do you work with them? Because now, you have to manage them as a team. Do you have any particular ways that you do that to pull them together, the common understanding of the common goal?
Sure. I think the easiest kind of partner for us to talk about in this light are the lighting designers that we work with. And we work with a couple and for many years and a lot. And, the old-fashioned way would be, you'd call a lighting company and the lighting company would give you the proposal after you've designed everything. And, that would be, we need 14 pin spots and one light on the check-in table and a couple of lights on the band. And in the same spirit that I said earlier, where things have gotten much more sophisticated, now we're bringing in those lighting designers from the onset of the ideas, because the truth is that most often now they're built into our scenic. the lighting. And, we need them to be part of that ideation process. One of my big bugaboos in lighting is I don't want to see the equipment. I do not want to walk into the room and the first thing I see
you don't want
is
to see
a
a
lighting
truss
boom.
or something, right?
So I want to figure out, how do we have the lighting do the job it needs to do, which is illuminate stuff. But how do we not see that equipment? And so we're trying to build it into our scenic. To do so, we need to bring them in from the earliest stages and sit down around a table and talk about the goals and talk about what are the inventive ways to do that and how are we linking together our invention process with their invention process. So instead of being two separate vendors, if you will, that have to come together on a common ground, how are we working together in a collaborative spirit to create one thing? And, it takes a certain amount of time to develop those relationships with those lighting designers, but in the best scenarios, that's what happens. And that, delivers a lot of magic too.
God, and the emotional impact that lighting can have, it boggles my mind to think in the past that, they'd come in after the fact.
Well, and for a lighting designer, listen, everybody wants to be artistically invested in something. Nobody wants to be the short order cook just taking the order, right? So when I think about the lighting designer as, like, we want you to do this, 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 and this. You need to put 47 pin spots. You got to have a light on the band and you got to have a light on the dance floor and it's got to be cheap. That's not a really awesome artistic experience for that person, right? So I would prefer to think about conveying what are our goals, what are the feelings that we want to have happen or elicit, what's the effect that we want to have happen, and give them the opportunity to talk to us about ways of achieving that and hopefully delivering us ideas that we didn't know existed, didn't know that there was equipment to do. And then we get excited about that too, because we always want to do something that's new. So, it's a certain generosity, I think, to have the mental space to be able to bring them in from the onset and have them be part of that process. And through that process, things get scrapped, right? And that is definitely antithetical to, the normal working process where it's a little bit more short order cook, but it takes a little bit more time. There's a little bit more energy that's invested, but it generally yields much better results.
Well, and with them, let's say, buying into it, they're a part of it. They're going to give more. You're going to get more.
Yeah, and I didn't get there because I felt like I wasn't getting enough.
Yeah, no,
right?
sure.
Like that wasn't the way to try to get more from a lighting designer.
No, it's like icing on the cake too.
Look, do I have clients that sometimes give me prescriptive things that I need to do? I do. Sometimes I don't also. A lot of times I don't. I don't mind being given prescriptive, do this, do this, do this. But we generally get to better results when that's not the case. And I try to turn the tables on that when that happens. I try to say, okay, I'm hearing what you're asking for, but I want to talk a little bit about what are the reasons behind it. So what are you feeling is not happening, or what are your goals? Like, what's the unified thing that we want to get to? Because there could be lots of different ways to get there. And I appreciate you throwing these ideas out. But if we take a step backwards and we focus on, what are you looking to achieve, then we can maybe come up with all kinds of visionary ways of doing so.
Mm-hmm. You talk about coming up with visionary ways, always keeping it fresh and new. How are you dealing with, and maybe this is how you're dealing with, the incredibly fast pace of change that's going on? There's something, Ray Kurzweil talks about the singularity that's coming in like another 25 years or something. The rate of the growth of change is becoming more and more vertical. Like in the past 10 years, we've grown technologically with what it took for 50 years before that. And that 50 took 200 before that. It's getting so fast and it's affecting us, not just technologically, but the social media and the communication and all of that. And I know you're real big on, of course, business development. How are you dealing with this huge, fast rate of change?
Well, it's hard, right? Yeah. It's, for a big corporate event, we used to have, 8 months lead time.
Yeah.
6 months lead time. Sometimes we get 6 weeks now.
Oh, right.
And the scale of the project hasn't gotten smaller.
Mm-hmm. More complex, right?
So, listen, 4 years ago, we might have turned down a lot of the jobs that came up last minute because they came up last minute and we were, conscious of not being able to turn things around as quickly. But the first couple of those that happened, they were freak accidents, right? But 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th phone call, you start to see a trend. And you start to say to yourself, well, if I can't figure out how to evolve in the new timelines of what's out in the world, then I'm going to be left behind. And so we've gotten much better about how to figure out how to move faster.
Interesting, with less lead time.
Do I wish it was different? Sure. But you can wish all you want, and then you could look in, down the street and see the reality. So the thing that I've always been very focused on is there's always a solution, right? So I am really a glass half full rather than a glass half empty. I always think that there is this great positive solution for how to combat the problem. And I feel like that is applicable to timelines. I think that's applicable to, team members. I think that's applicable to budget. There's always a creative solution. And that's actually what makes it interesting. If somebody handed you the blank check and said, do whatever you want, and I don't care how much it costs, on first glance, that feels like it would be exciting. But at the end of the day, it's kind of boring to have nothing to react to, Like, I would much prefer to somebody to say, like, these are the parameters, go.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's true. There's one more topic I want to get into also before we go, is pricing. Mm-hmm. You were guest co-hosting the Next Level discussion about Cindy Novotny's second interview, and we talked about some pricing there. I'm curious to know your own personal perspective with your company on pricing.
Yeah. Well, it's a hot button these days, right?
Yeah, I'll say.
Our personal perspective, we just believe in being as transparent as humanly possible for our clients, for ourselves. And I don't believe in sort of a unified given structure that all event planners or all event designers must abide by. I feel like the market determines what is fair price. Your own sense of your own value and your time determines that. And, I'm not sure why the drive to standardize that feels more like about what somebody personally might feel uncomfortable about versus what's happening externally. And, Cindy did a really great job of talking about this. I mean, you start your career and before you've done anything, you've done nothing, right? So we all had a first job. And then, I've now been doing this for 26, 27 years. And so 26, 27 years later, I've done many jobs. And so what I charged for that first job when I had low overhead and it was just me and one other person by ourselves, and what I charge now is different. But also the scale of the service is different, and the scale of the experience is different, and the scale of the project is much different. And frankly, I learned over the years by doing very small things, starting with, a drop-off flower arrangement at a real estate agency for $25 a week to, now big projects, big events with moving parts and casts of thousands. So those are really different experiences. And I do believe that you have to learn through the course of working, and you have to learn through the course of experience what is the right pricing structure for you at the time and place where you're at. And, the specific industry that we're talking about here is the luxury wedding market. And I would venture to say that those that are at the top end of the luxury wedding market are not getting a job when they're competing against other people, not because their price was $5,000 or $10,000 different than somebody else's price. It was other factors. It was personality, or it was artistic vision, or it was a vibe they got, or their best friend worked with them and they don't want to have the same thing that their best friend has. I mean, it can be any number of reasons. But ultimately, probably wasn't price that was the real deciding factor.
When you earlier talked about transparency, just to get into some specifics, you're talking about with your clients being transparent about the cost. Like, can I ask, are you charging, is it a percentage? Is it a flat fee? Can I ask something about how you do it?
We don't believe in the percentage thing at all. Mm-hmm. We charge a flat fee.
A design fee, basically.
Correct. A design and planning fee. And we provide the decor as well. So the decor is a separate thing that we bill for, and that's based upon the stuff and the amount of it and what it is. But we charge a flat fee based upon what the scale of the project is and how much time we think goes into that. And, for example, if I do a project in Japan, it takes a lot more time than if I do one in New York, where my home base is. So, we have people out of the office, we have lots of trips. There's just different ways of looking at it. But I never wanted a client to feel like the meter was ticking. We all know that it probably takes much longer than anybody ever thinks it's going to take. But I believe that the price that I quote from the beginning is the price that it should be at the end. And partially because our job generally is to manage a budget and to be the partner to our clients to make the right choices of how to spend their money and to get the most bang for their buck. And if I'm holding this glass and I say, I think this is a really wonderful glass, you should have that. If they think I'm making 18% of the cost of that glass, then that lack of transparency is undercutting the value that I'm providing as an advisor.
So how do you account for the risk perhaps you're taking on of something evolving, changing, that's going to cost you more? Do you
Well, when you say cost me more, do you mean in time?
It could be time. It could be materials.
Well, the materials, that's a whole separate thing. So if we're just looking at time and intellectual, if planning is about time and expertise, materials doesn't really enter into that realm of it. There might be some small material things. I don't account for it, frankly. I bite the bullet and I say, okay, I thought it was going to be this.
Okay, so sometimes...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of the time I know what I'm getting into, and most of the time it is just that. And sometimes it's not. And when it's not, I learn from it. And the next time around, when something else comes up that's sort of like that, in the back of my mind, I say, oh, I learned from this experience. How do I apply this learning to this new opportunity? But as a professional, I say, okay, this was the price that we agreed upon. And and I feel comfortable and confident in that.
But even when they come to you and they say, now I'm thinking blah, 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 blah.
I think if it's something that is truly a different experience,
then they'll understand.
Yeah, like we're going to be doing this wedding in New York. It was going to be for 60 people. We've now decided to fly 500 people to Italy, and it's going to be for a week. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be 90 events. Uh-huh. That's a different story.
I would hope so.
So, I think that there's realistic, when scope changes in a significant way, but if it's, there's 20 extra people and somebody is a little less of a decision maker than you thought they were going to be, and it takes a little longer to get to the finish line, I think that that's part of being in a service business. That's not something that the client should be reimbursing you for. And as far as the materials are concerned, yes, when you start, if it's a party for 60 people and then all of a sudden you have 120 people, sure, you're going to have more centerpieces. It's going to cost more. But I believe from a planning and design fee perspective, the flat fee is most effective for us because it immediately takes the guessing game out. Everybody knows exactly what they've agreed to. Everybody knows that the clock is not being watched. Everybody knows that you're not making money from a percentage basis off of the things that are being recommended. So if you're recommending a particular caterer, if you're recommending a particular band, it's not because you're skimming off of that. It's because you think they're the right partners for them. Right. It's the right quality, it's the right price, it's the right effect.
And in terms of transparency, they're getting like a line item list of all the items?
As far as we're concerned, our contracts with our clients are only for our design and planning fee. The rest of the contracts are direct with the clients.
Well, and there's liability issues, which now you are not taking responsibility for.
In certain cases, yes. So, what I don't believe for us, I'm not going to create one master invoice for the entire party that includes invitations, caterer, videographer, music, photographer, and submit that to the client. My job is to get the best pricing and the best value, and the contracts are with the client directly.
Got it. Well, David, man, I appreciate the time you've taken. I would love periodically, maybe once a year, we'll check in because you're so inspiring and you educate too. So thank you for being on the show again. What is the best way for people to find out about you?
Ooh.
Is it davidstarkdesign.com or?
Yeah, davidstarkdesign.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, which is David_Stark_design. And I'm always happy to chat with you. So thank you for having me back.
Yeah, thanks. And we're going to put all this in the show notes too. So thanks again. Thank you for listening to my conversation with David Stark, part 2. If you missed part 1, be sure to go back and check it out from December. Be sure to check out David's site at davidstarkdesign.com. Again, davidstarkdesign.com. And his social media handles, David_Stark_design. And also check out the Wedding Biz show notes on him, some wonderful photos of his work at our website at theweddingbiz.com. And if you enjoyed this, please share it, send it off to your friends and colleagues. It helps us to build our community. And review it where you get your podcast from. That also helps new people find us. Once again, don't forget to check out on Wednesday the next level that goes with this with my guest co-host Sean Lowe, talking about my interview with David. And our social media handle, last thing, is to please follow us at Wedding Biz Show. Again, Wedding Biz Show. So next week's interview is a very, very special photographer named Greg Lawson. And you're going to find out why I feel this is so special. I'm traveling like crazy. I'm actually speaking at a podcast conference, Podfest 19, which is really cool because this show, The Wedding Biz, is going so well. So they want me to tell my story of how I started it. And with so much going on, I wanted to release this special episode from another show that I had for a while called Extraordinary Ordinary People. And this interview of Greg Lawson, the photographer, again, is really special. When I listened to it again, it just grounded me again. It was something that I needed with all this crazy stuff going on. It just really was beautiful. So check it out next week. I want to thank our sponsors, Kushner Entertainment at KushnerEntertainment.com and also OFD Consulting at OFDconsulting.com. So enjoy the week, and we'll catch you next week on The Wedding Biz.